There was a lot of discussion today about what happened 5 years ago in Porto and what is the important legacy of all this. But when I saw the name of Mario Centeno on the list of speakers, I had to think about what happened 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, I think now in these football weeks, a lot of you remember that Portugal did not only reach the final, but won the championship. But also, very importantly for our topic, Portugal managed to defeat the excessive deficit procedure. And that was a very, very important achievement. And I think it was a kind of turning point about how Europeans think about economic governance, the functioning of the monetary union, what does it mean to have cohesion and convergence, not only nominal, but also real convergence in the European Union. So we learned a lot from this experience. I think we should pay tribute to this policy contribution of Mario Centeno, who, as you know, is a former Minister of Finance, but also a former chair of the Eurogroup and the former governor of the Bank of Portugal. Mario Centeno, the floor is yours. We would like to hear your insights.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Two issues that I had to settle. First, which language to use. And I decided English. I am an invited person here by FEBS. Laszlo, you all, thank you so much for coming to Porto, and this was the first decision. The second was how someone seen mostly coming from the financial world will speak to a social dimension audience. In my favor, I must say that academically I am closer to your everyday concerns than probably the monetary or financial ones. So that also eases a little bit my tone. But being in the financial world and being progressive is the most difficult task that you can find in Europe. So I'm gonna be optimistic, very optimistic maybe. Sorry for that. And I'll start with a quote of Amanda Gorman in the poem, The Hill We Climb, that she read in the inauguration of Joe Biden, only a short portion of it. That is totally suited for what we just heard. She says, "We are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose." This is exactly how we should look to Europe these days. So let me begin with a simple conviction. Europe has much to be proud of. We are not a perfect union. We know that. We know, too, that we still have work to do if we are to combine solidarity with responsibility, integration with resilience, and ambition with prudence. But we should also not allow necessary self-criticism to obscure a larger truth. Over the last decade, Europe has been one of the great, if not the greatest, providers of stability in the world. And that's not only due to Mr. Trump. It's because of what we do in Europe. Europe remains one of the most advanced expressions of democratic, social, and civic progress in modern history. That is why I want to begin by commending the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, especially for the theme chosen for this gathering here in Porto. I'm referring to the decision to place two words side by side, Europe and sovereignty. That is not a minor choice. It is a deep political statement, because European sovereignty is not about retreat. It is not about isolation. And it is not at all about nostalgia. European sovereignty is the capacity to act together, to protect together, and to decide together. It is the result of a long historical journey through war and reconstruction, through dictatorship, Portugal, and liberation, through division and reconciliation. The Europe we know today did not emerge by chance. It was built through struggle, it was built through democratic effort, and it was built through the steady advance of social and political rights that had to be claimed, defended, and institutionalized. Free education for all, universal access to health care, systems of social protection that are both effective and responsible. These achievements were political choices. They don't happen by chance. And they remain political choices today, as we just heard. Even today, there are those who continue to argue, for example, that inequality is somewhat necessary and fundamental for growth. I mean, this is simply not true, as they put it. Europe's history tells us completely otherwise. Europe's history shows that prosperity, freedom, and social cohesion can advance together. That is why European sovereignty matters. Because sovereignty is not only about power, it is about citizenship. It is about preserving the democratic space in which our societies can govern themselves according to their values. We meet today at an important moment. 15 years ago, Europe went through a period in which the welfare state and the progressive tradition that helped to build it was treated as the source of economic weaknesses. The result, as we all remember, was a dictated, coordinated austerity. That strategy did not strengthen Europe. It weakened Europe. It inflicted avoidable hardship on millions and millions of Europeans, and it damaged trust in democratic politics. We should also be clear about another consequence. These policies, they helped open the door to the rise of the far right in mainstream political life. That too is part of the legacy of that period. But Europe was able to learn. Before the pandemic, a different understanding had already begun to emerge. A more balanced view, in my opinion. A more European view of what economic governance requires. When the pandemic came, that view prevailed, and Europe was able to put forward the most coordinated, solidary response to the biggest threat that we faced until then. But that didn't happen by accident again. Progressives played an important role in making it possible. In the Eurogroup, in the European Council, in the Commission and in the European Parliament, without our effort, the result would have been way different. But perhaps the most important change was not institutional, it was political. For the first time, many Europeans experienced directly what collective European action could mean in a moment of crisis. They saw the value of unity, they saw the strengths of common institutions, and they saw the euro, yes, our common currency, not as a constraint, but as a source of protection. That mattered a lot. Today, 74% of citizens across the European Union support the euro. Within the euro area, that number is even higher, 83%, is at the highest level ever recorded. I don't see a lack of support for Europe in these numbers. Because sovereignty begins as an institutional fact, but it endures only when it becomes a shared political confidence. A confidence that Europe can act, a confidence that Europe can matter in the world. And if we are serious about European sovereignty, then we must also be serious about Europe's strengths. One of those strengths is the European labor market. For a long time, it was fashionable to describe the European labor market as a rigid, outdated, or incapable of adjustment. The law that did not pass today in the Portuguese parliament was portraying the Portuguese labor market precisely with this sort of comments. But this no longer fits the facts. During the pandemic, Europe preserved employment on a remarkable scale. Again, that was not an accident. That was the result of policy. Europe chose to protect the relationship between workers and firms rather than allow mass dislocation and hope that the market will repair the damage later. Programs such as SURE, financed by common debt issued by the European Commission, worked and helped quite significantly for that purpose. We sustained employment, and we helped preserving the productive capacity of European firms. And that helped Europe emerging from crisis with greater social cohesion. The labor market also recovered quickly. After the decline at the start of the pandemic, the job vacancy rate in the European Union rebounded by 0.6 percentage points. This is quite a large number. We already heard about it. We created 12 million jobs over the crisis period, and especially while facing, as we heard in one of the questions, a sharp increase in the interest rate. And those rates increased very sharply. It was the largest increase in interest rates in such a short period of time in Europe ever. And that damages the capacity to create jobs, to invest. But our labor market proved resilient, continued to create jobs, continued to deliver what we, for many, many years, expected it to do. So the social fabric, in a way, held. Real wages came under pressure, as they did elsewhere. Actually, they fell in Europe, accommodating part of the pressure of inflation. So the labor market helped monetary policy to have an impact, an effect, but the labor market absorbed the shock in a way that only few considered possible not long ago. This was partly because policy coordination occurred. For the first time, Europe was not only politically united in crisis, it was economically coordinated in crisis. That matters. Because it shows that Europe is capable not only of setting rules, but of producing results. Still, we cannot be complacent. Europe faces serious structural challenges. Its labor market needs more workers than current demographic trends can provide. Its economies need higher levels of skills. We still lack, for example, the United States in the share of college graduates in our labor market. And its institutions need to ensure that people who enter the labor market remain attached to it over time. Long-term unemployment, a high share of subsidization, those are problems of the past. Long-term unemployment in Europe fell from 55% in 2014 to close to 30% one decade later. This is a very substantial decrease. So we need to look at the long-term capacity to grow in Europe. Europe does all of this while remains fiscally prudent. We are very conservative. Europeans are truly conservative in fiscal terms. We need to live with it. That is part of its political character. It is part of its institutional design, as you know. Plenty of regulations, treaties, defining every single step of fiscal policy in Europe. And whatever our preferences may be, strategy must begin with reality. My own experience in European policymaking taught me that progress is often made not by denying this reality, but by working within it. That too is part of the European method. Europe moves when it builds legitimacy. Europe advances when it combines ambition with trust. And Europe succeeds when it proves in practice that common action delivers common benefit. That is why evaluating Next Generation EU and showing the importance it had financially, economically, and social to Europe is so important. In the 21st century, two indicators tell most of the story when we compare the United States and Europe. The United States public debt increased by 73 percentage points since year 2000. European by 17. The United States put massive amount of money in its economy. That is not sustainable, but in the short term, that has a big impact on growth. But still, when we look at GDP per capita, Europe trails the United States by the smallest of the margins that we can possibly measure, 0.1% annually since year 2000. Of course, over the period of 25 years, this is something. But it's not that Europe trails the US economically, as many try to convince us. So Europe should learn from others, but not imitate blindly. Its strength lies elsewhere. It lies in the quality of its institutions, in the debates we have. It lies in its unique social model. It lies in its ability to preserve cohesion while adapting to change. Again, this is clearly shown in the numbers of the support for European institutions broadly that the Eurobarometer shows. It reached 52%. 52% of Europeans say they tend to trust the European Union, which is simply not a big number, but it's the highest number since 2007. We should build in this political asset, because this is a political asset. And in the world we now face, it is a strategic asset too. We are living through a period of geopolitical rivalry, geoeconomic fragmentation, and strategic uncertainty. We are never sure of what is going to happen with the big decisions tomorrow. And in this world, Europe cannot be content simply to remain stable. It must also become more capable. We need to continue to reinforce, as Amanda Gorman said for the US, for us to build a union with a purpose, a social purpose that is more coherent. And we should not imitate. That doesn't fit the European strategy. So, to conclude, Europe must deepen the political and institutional foundations of its own model. It's our model. It's not anyone else's model. It must sustain common investment. To sustain common investment, we must finance it with common instruments. A safe asset, financial, it's what we call it in financial terms. We need to continue with what we did during COVID and to have debt issued jointly in Europe. And we need to use this money to build a central fiscal capacity. Without a central fiscal capacity, the answer to Estelle's problems will never, ever be solved. The defense problem is the same thing. Every common goal, and that's sovereignty, that's integration, and that's what, in my opinion, we should put all our efforts. The lesson of recent years is not that Europe should become something else, but this. Europe is a democratic union. My first statement when I was president of the Eurogroup always started as follows. I am the chair of then 19 mature democracies. This is what Europe is made of. We are a democratic union with the largest social dimension in every bloc in the world. No other bloc can compete with us for that. Adding sovereignty to this would be my dream day. So thank you again. And I think very profoundly that this is a progressive task, and that is one of the greatest responsibilities in our times. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria, for this truly insightful and inspirational speech. You summed up a lot of lessons from, I think, more than just 15 years, but a longer history of the economic and social governance. And to close, to continue kind of closing and concluding thoughts, I would like to invite two colleagues on stage representing the co-organizers. Pedro Silva Pereira, President of Fundación República, who is also a former MEP, and Valeska Hesse, who is the Director of the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, Spain and Portugal. So please take your seat. And really, the only question from me to both of you, Valeska, maybe you want to start. What is your takeaway? How would you conclude? What are the most interesting points you would like to highlight in closing? You need the equipment, right? Yes. Do you hear me? Does it work? Does it not work? Press the button.
Yes, now it's working. Okay, thank you. So thank you very much for the opportunity. And I know it's been a long day, so I'll try also to be brief. But thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Yeah, what is my takeaway? I think my takeaway is that these kind of events are really important, and this event especially. Not only because of the agenda, because of what we heard, kind of the content, the excellent speakers, but I think also because it leaves us a bit more inspired, a bit more motivated, also a bit more self-reassured that we are not alone, that we are, I mean, at least all the people in this room, but even many more working on these topics, that we are not crazy or irresponsible, as many would like to, or some would like to frame us, but that there is a lot of evidence now that the foundation of European prosperity after Second World War was social partnership and social cohesion, and that at ETUC put it this morning, competitiveness and social rights are just two sides of the same coin, no? And that they are not incompatible with each other. And for me, actually, the event here relates also quite a lot to another big event we had this year, the GPM, the Global Progressive Mobilization in Barcelona. I think some of the people who are here were there as well. And actually, I mean, it was not called Social Europe, but we discussed a lot of these topics, and it all boiled down to this in the end. And I think one big takeaway also from GPM is that we need more courage, no? And I was also think that this is, and progressive parties and actors need more courage to implement the right social policies. So this to the event, and maybe a bit, for me, the other big takeaway, when this morning Roxana Minsatu said, how do we connect this with the people? No, I think this is other, I mean, it came out a bit also of the audience, we are sitting here, but how does this connect with real people's life? And I had to think about the last time I took an Uber in Lisbon, but it could have happened probably in Madrid and other cities. So I started to chat with the Uber driver, and we talked about pastel de nata, and he said, oh, do you know, actually, I'm a white-collar worker at a famous pastry factory. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, so that's actually your second job. And he said, yes, of course, otherwise I cannot make end meets, no? I have 2 daughters, the public health is really bad, so I want to pay for private insurance, education if they want to study. So I think that's also the kind of people we have to look out for, because he's not poor, so the fight against, the strategy against poverty, that's not for him. He's not targeted with that, but he's afraid of getting poor. And I think that's what's more worrisome, even I think. And I think that's the kind of people we also have to target with the social Europe, because that's where the frustration also then comes from. We talked also about, I think Elisa Ferreira mentioned this, no, against the system, and that's then how populist party also managed to rise on this. So that's, I think that's also important to take away, that it's not only the fight against poverty, but it's also to see, okay, people are again, are really afraid of getting poor, no? And what can we do about that? So for me, that would be really the most important questions is, how do we move on from here? How do we get the message on the street? How can we start a broad societal debate about the use of AI? I think this came in every debate AI came about, and we already discussed yesterday in another forum that we actually need a new development model, no, coming with AI. I think also first and foremost in Germany, we can see that our current model based on cheap energy, on export, and is not working anymore. So we need debates about this. What is the new model we want to have, and how can we combine economic models with social security? And that's, I really liked, Maria said this several times also, we already talked about it yesterday, how can we build political majorities for this, no? Because it also came across several times that at the moment in the EU Commission and the EU Parliament, social democratic parties are not at their strongest, so it's very difficult to influence the agenda, no? So how can we convince voters? How can we tell them, if you want a social Europe, then you have to vote social democratic parties, because that's the ones who will bring you social Europe. And there I see an important role also for FES, for FEPS and the other foundations in organizing this kind of events, but also maybe be a bit, like a thorn in the skin of this party, like saying, you have to do this, no? You have to be more convincing towards or deliver towards the voters. If you allow me one last word to thank, I would really like to thank the organizers behind the scenes especially. I mean, there's a lot of visible things here, but there are also a lot of invisible things that have been done, that happened behind the scenes while we are all sitting here. So really a big, big thank you to the team that organized this year. I'm very, very impressed. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Pedro, would you like to take over? Do you think we managed to revive the spirit of Porto? What do you think we succeeded in, and do you see any deficit still?
Well, I will start by declaring a divergence with Mário Centeno, because he chose to speak in English, but I will speak in Portuguese. Okay. Eu acho que, em primeiro lugar,
First and foremost, I would like that for Respublica Foundation is a big pleasure to partner with FEPS and Friedrich Ebert and other partners to get together here in Porto with this main goal, that is to revive the spirit of Porto. I would say that the first issue, and I'm not going to draw any conclusions about this conference, but what I would like to underscore is the importance of that summit in Porto, not only from the historical political standpoints, but because it proved to be a different model, a different and inspiring model, because it brought together different European institutions at the highest level, with the level of commitment that is quite sizable, and also brought together social partners along. And this was important, it was innovative, and it should inspire us for the future. Secondly, we took stock of progress achieved, and we looked into the future. And I think that from that standpoint, I would like to register the progress achieved, and Mario Centeno very specifically underscored that, because that's a part of the European project. But I would also like to discuss the limitations for implementation. One clear conclusion of this conference is the recognition of serious difficulties to implement this. The executive deputy president, Roxana, recognized that, in particular in the fields of vocational training and in terms of attaining job quality in many sectors, we are still faced with some problems. And it's not only a matter of targets, but rather the directives that we've approved. There have been some implementation problems. Then let me add the following, and as Dylan would say, times are changing, and of course the times are changing, and there is a change in the European panorama, and this is not good news for social Europe. There is a relationship between different political forces we cannot ignore, and that threatens the political commitments based on which progressive Europeans to attain solutions for the future for that very basic idea of a social Europe. That is in crisis as a result of this change of the relationship of forces. And it's also, we're at a time when Europe is faced with added challenges. First and foremost, competitiveness, because of the changes in geopolitics and geoeconomy at the global level. And on the other hand, in view of the challenges of issues or security-related issues. Both of these are threats to social Europe, because on the right wing side there is an idea about deregulating the global economy, and at the budget level there is this idea that if you cut budgets, then you can invest in defense. So there is a change in terms of relationship of forces at a time when we have to make very serious choices. Then another important issue that was discussed today and already yesterday was to know what is the progressive people's response. Of course, there has to be some defensive attitude on the response of the progressive, because what is at stake is that we have to underscore the importance of the European social model, because it is the very core of European construction. However, this defensive attitude, which leads us to take stance about the deregulation, about the FFF, the MFF, is not enough to actually face the threats that we have ahead. This means to fight for a vision of social progress, not only in terms of the rights that have been achieved, but also those that are yet to be achieved in the critical times ahead. We have already started we already put on the agenda the issue of accessible housing. European instances cannot be insensitive to that. All throughout the day, we also discussed the migrant integration and family regrouping. I mean, there has to be legal systems that will function. And this has also has to be a part of the social Europe. But there are yet two other aspects I would like to underscore amidst so many others. The one is the issue of digital for this main transformation in global economies. That entails implications regarding workers' rights. We were talking about the directive on AI in the labor market, vocational training, time or labor time, conciliation with the family life, regulation, which is necessary, and the issue of production of AI in the European context. I don't know whether I can quote in a progressive meeting, quote a pope. We have quoted Pope Francis before about inequality and poverty, so it makes sense what Pope Leon has just said, not only about AI and its dangers, but the question he asks, which is, who has at the end of the day, the power to guide AI. And in fact, the power of current and modern society is no longer in the states, where we could make them accountable for that. This power has been transferred to gigantic oligarchic monopolies, and that in itself is a danger that forces us to recover our strategic sovereignty. And this is also connected with another issue, which is inequality. What we've been witnessing with this increasing inequality created by the technological giants of digital world is a scandal. I don't see anything better for progressive people than to grab the flag of struggle against inequality. I think this is a huge task we have ahead. And I conclude by saying that I hope that this conference has also helped to clarify which side we stand on. What is our struggle? Where do we want to get to? And the goal is social Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you for these concluding thoughts, but also for the excellent cooperation to make this conference happen. We are almost at the very end of the program. I would like to allocate still half a minute to Mario and half a minute to myself. Mario, you warned us against, let's say, naively thinking about the US model, whether it comes to economics or otherwise, but I think you still gave us an inspiration to think about one element of the US model, which we should not copy, but follow the Hamiltonian. We have been speaking about this Hamiltonian for do you think we are getting closer?
Well, I think we experienced it already. So it's not a matter of we need to do it. We already have it. And many, quite often, posso mudar para português só para não ficar aqui atrás?
I will change into English. So now I'm going to speak in Portuguese, the speaker says. We have been there. We did it. 2020 was a year of major decisions regarding this issue. Quite often, It is said that this was only one-off thing. It was a short-term experiment, but that is not true, because it's going to take us over 30 years to repay that debt. And over 30 years, or more than 30 years, we will be struggling with the MFF in order to get the funds to repay that debt. We are going to exhaust the debates, to pay one single decision. Why was this the case, and why was this depleted, and what is the problem with this model? When we suffer a shock, the worst solution mechanism for such shock is to try and address it at that very moment. That was a mistake that we addressed in the financial crisis. We tried to solve everything through austerity. But in this solution in 2020, we managed to create a gap in the level of response to the pandemic. And we managed to get into the solution the benefit of allocating these funds to goals that were more important. And that was the best answer that one can give to an economic shock. What we're faced with now is challenges that may be bigger or smaller shocks. We're talking about energy, as was mentioned here, and we have to get together and join efforts through a joint financial response to implement a centralized budget at the EU level for common responses, because that is the path that is going to make Europe to be more Europe. The U.S., as Hamilton pointed out, have been doing so for over 200 years. And when you look at inequality between, American states, we see that there is very much smaller than the inequality between European states. And from the economic standpoint, the reason for this to be as is because the central budget mechanism reduces inequalities between regions or between countries, something that today we cannot do in Europe.
Thank you so much. I know there is always something else to be added, and the deeper discussion could start, but we have to end, and I thank you all for the contributions and also the cooperation with not only Friedrich Ebert Stiftung and Respublika, but also Solidar, the Johannes Mikkelsen Center, and Pro Forum. I think the lesson, if I can just connect with the latest point, indeed that without cohesion and solidarity, we can't have a resilient Europe, which is also competitive, which is also sovereign. All this needs to be connected, and we have to work in the coming period to promote concrete policy ideas and solutions at the EU level, but also within nation states to make this more convincing also for the citizens. It's not enough to talk, but also to implement as much as we can out of this. I thank the colleagues who organized, and we'll continue to work on the communication. We collected a lot of materials, recordings, which will go out in the coming period. There are always more people watching online, and the follow-up presentations which we will disseminate, and hopefully they will also benefit from all the thoughts and analysis which has been our experience today and yesterday. I also thank the interpreters, and I'm glad they also helped all of us to understand each other and have this constructive discussion. Today, I wish you a very nice weekend and a safe journey home. Some of you traveled a lot. That's particularly appreciated that we really had a genuine international conference for many, many countries of Europe. And indeed, the idea of social Europe, I think we'll always have a safe home in Portugal. I think that we can rely on. Thank you.